Alright, so this is Quantum Mortis #1, Man Disrupted. So, and Ethan Van Sciver was doing a review of this too after Vox Day kind of started some drama with him. I don't know if he meant to. It's really stupid how the drama got started, and it doesn't reflect well on Vox Day, because what happened is Vox Day was calling out diversity in comics for being what he called a moderate, and he showed a Twitter conversation between Seth Englehart, Diversity in Comics, and Ethan Van Sciver. And in the article, Vox Day claimed to not know who Ethan Van Sciver is, which does not at all dispel the notion that Vox Day doesn't care about comics, because when I got into comics 12, 13 years ago, however long it was, at the time, Ethan Van Sciver was known as one of the best in the industry. That was before I knew about any, this online stuff. That was before I knew anything about SJWs and left-wing politics and all that. But he was just known as one of the best in the industry, and it was really hard to say otherwise. That was back when Sinestro Core War, Blackest Night, Brightest Day, all those big-time events that Ethan Van Sciver either was artist on or at least helped co-create, they were in full swing at the time, and he was known as a big deal then. So to not know who he was and to not particularly care who he was when you start this drama, it looks bad on you. And then shortly thereafter, he publishes this, which is Archaven Comics, Quantum Mortis, A Man Disrupted, ish by the book. So it's kind of a confusing title. And Archaven Comics is it's the newly launched comic imprint of Castalia House Publishing. Castalia House Publishing is where Vox Day primarily publishes his work, and it's the imprint that Alt Hero is being printed under. So this is not Alt Hero. This is a completely separate thing that has nothing to do with it. But Alt Hero's issue 1, according to their press release, is supposed to come out late February. So people that are sort of looking forward to Alt Hero, and I consider myself one of them. Alt Hero's getting a lot of pushback. They say it's not, that it's just as bad as SJW Marvel. And my view on it, and I made a whole video explaining my view on this, and I still get pushback for it to this day, is that politics don't belong in mainstream superhero comics. You shouldn't go to Spider-Man and see a weird thing about a feminist agenda. To read a book like Green Lanterns and read about race politics and stuff like that, like explicit references to modern-day racial issues. It doesn't belong there. It's artistically bad because it takes you out of the story. So even beyond the just simply not wanting to hear about the politics, which is true, it's bad for the story itself. So I don't think that politics belong in mainstream superhero comics. However, Alt Hero isn't established mainstream superhero stuff. It's an indie publishing house, and it's using original characters to tell an original story that may or may not include either right-wing or, at the very least, anti-SJW politics. We don't actually know because it hasn't come out yet. We don't know what the story is actually going to be. But you see things like Black Mask Publishing, which is basically pro-Antifa books, and nobody pushes back on that. Not too many people push back on all the creator-owned stuff and Image that has taken a hard left turn. But, you have one right-wing imprint, and everybody loses their minds. So it's kind of dumb. And what I hope that Alt Hero will do, if it's successful, is that I hope that Alt Hero will show that there is a marketplace for different points of view, that essentially the people that are tired of the SJW stuff, that they will show up to buy a comic that's against SJW stuff. That's my hope. All that's not going to matter, though, if Alt Hero sucks. And so this is sort of, even though this is not associated with Alt Hero, it's hard not to think of this in terms of what Vox Day is trying to do to push back against SJW politics. And if, I'm sure that he knows everything that I just said, but if Alt Hero sucks, it's not going to matter. And so when you look at this, Quantum Mortis, A Man Disrupted, issue 1 by the book, it does not inspire confidence. Ethan Van Sciver did a review of this, and I basically agree with everything Ethan Van Sciver said. And he probably said it better than I'm going to say it. But basically, yeah, this whole thing is just, it's very wordy, which is not itself a problem. I mean, if you saw my Transformers vs. Visionary review, I flat out said, which was a very wordy book too. I said I don't care about lots of exposition. I said I don't care about these sort of complicated stories. But I don't, frankly, that was done better. As much as that kind of sucks to say, that Mags Sajo, who was somebody that I did not have a lot of respect for, and I ended up liking it. And I have more respect for her now because she actually responded to that video on both the the channel page and on my Twitter, and she was actually very polite and respectful. Whereas Vox Day, I don't necessarily respect Vox Day per se, because I do think he says stuff he shouldn't say, but I do appreciate what he's trying to do, even if I don't agree with necessarily everything that he's doing about it. So I wanted to like this, and I just didn't. And it's stuff like, even as Skyver points this out, it's like, you know, it takes a while to even figure out what is going on, even though they say it in this huge wall of text right here that my cursor is going over. It's like Ethan Van Sciver said it. You know, this guy is a cop who's investigating a murder. So why is the actual murder scene 5 or 6 pages into it rather than the second or third page? The way that people are characterized, it's not very good. It's like the cop here, this dude, he's sort of portrayed as this, you know, really cool, gruff guy, but you don't really see him doing anything cool or gruff. He's just talking and talking and talking, and then he even gets clowned by this one alien kid here. What else? I'm very forgiving of indie art, because it's like, you know, even if I don't like an art style, it's like, well, it's still better than I could do. I have a lot of respect for graphic artists, even ones that I don't particularly enjoy. So the artist here, you know, who knows where he'll be in, you know, a couple years' time, but as of right now, this is okay for indie art, but it would, if this was at Marvel or DC, it would be laughed out. It's very muddy, and then you go from weird sci-fi vistas like on this page, this kind of like Fifth Element stuff right here, to, yeah, basically downtown any city in America. Even though this is supposed to be an alien planet. The idea, I'm going to give you the story, because the book does a terrible job of it. I'm going to do it more succinctly than the book does. Basically what happens is that there's this alien planet. We're in the 30th century, and it's run by Earthlings, but there's aliens from like all over the galaxy here, and it's sort of became this weird mishmash of different alien cultures that all kind of hate each other. And there's this guy that gets murdered, and he's apparently a high-ranking member of some clan or other, even though they don't really know who he is. So this cop here is investigating the murder, and I guess there seems to be 2 forms of police, at least. There's like the local police, and basically this sort of FBI CIA hybrid that investigates extraterrestrial stuff, I guess. I'm not really sure. So anyway, this guy is investigating the murder as a murder, and then he's joined by the intelligence cop person who looks like this. And you can see she's got the Judge Dredd boots and the sort of ridiculous cover girl pose. Although, I'll give them this. You know, it's kind of funny, you look at old 90s comics, and the women were drawn in a really ridiculous way, but they were actually characterized in a really reasonable way. And you kind of see that here, where she, even though, yeah, she looks, you know, she's got this posing like this, she still acts like a real person. Anyway, so they're like, they just talk and talk, and I cannot honestly tell you what they're talking about. And then there's this shot here. It's the only like legitimately cool shot in the whole book. It's not just a static shot of somebody talking. And then it just kind of ends. I guess this is based on a book, like a book that Vox Day or somebody at Castalia House wrote. I don't know what they did exactly, but it kind of almost feels like they just took the book almost word for word. They cut out all the parts that describe what things and what people look like, and then just published that as a comic. Because it's like basically nothing happens in this whole issue. The 2 police officers meet, they know that somebody died, and they think that it might be a political murder, but it also might not be. And then it ends. Oh, okay, so there you go right there. The Quantum Mortis, a man disrupted by Steve Rizasa and Vox Day. And then you see who... writers, artists, some Russian dude, I'm not going to try to pronounce that, Vox Day. Vox Day, that's not his real name, by the way, it's Theodore Beale, in case you're wondering. This ending here gives a much better version of what's going on than either I did or this issue did, including, like, characterization and things like that. But it's just not very good. It's not very good on a technical level, and then his response to Ethan Van Sciver's criticism is just really cringy and really tone deaf. So this is what he says here. So Vox Day says, this review is precisely why I pay no attention to the professionals in the comics industry. Well, obviously, I'm not a professional. I don't know if this will ever get back to him, but I don't know what you can change. I don't know what you could do. I don't know how to make it better. I just know I didn't like this issue. And like I said, I basically agree with the things that Ethan Van Sciver said. Their sales are plummeting, their channels are dying. Ethan Van Sciver's are not, though. That's the thing. Like, was it Comic Chemist or Captain Frugal? I don't know. Somebody ran the numbers and they find out that putting Ethan Van Sciver on a book, it does make the sales stronger. Their stories are lightweight, superficial, and boring. I mean, that's true of some people. That's definitely true of some people. It's also not true of some people. And they can't successfully develop any interesting new characters. Like I said, that's true of a lot of creators, but it's not true of all of them. Like, I get some pushback on this, but I really like Gwenpool. I think Gwenpool is an interesting and new character. And then he says, and yet, their first reaction to a first effort that is not only doing something different, but is literally the #1 new release on Amazon is to smugly denounce it as awful. Okay, I'm not sure if he gets this, but #1 issues always do pretty well. Diversity in Comics did this in his follow-up to the Transformers vs. Visionaries review. He talked about how his crappy Image comic still got reorders from Diamond. Like, #1 issues always do fairly well because of just interest. So it's good for him. It's good for Vox Day that this first issue did well. That doesn't mean that it's good. You know, if issues 2 and 3 and 4 and 15 and 25 and 35, if those issues do well, then you can say you've got something. But just because the #1 does well, I mean, that shows that there's some interest in it, and there's some curiosity, but that doesn't mean that it's good. It's time to tell stuff like that. It's not initial sales. Well, then he goes on to say, blah, blah, blah. So stick to drawing, Ethan, Vox Day says, and leave the storytelling to the real writers instead of cheap wannabes in your industry. You know, it's very interesting listening to Ethan Van Sciver's channel and hearing his commentary about Green Lantern Rebirth and Sinestro Corps War and all the stuff that led to. I didn't realize just how much of that Ethan Van Sciver came up with. I just assumed, like most people probably do, that the writer comes up with everything and the artist is just a monkey that draws it and occasionally puts his input into things. I didn't realize that, you know, Ethan Van Sciver was the one that came up with the rainbow color concept, that all the colors of the rainbow have their own ring, and that, you know, turning Sinestro into Hitler, basically. It's like, it turns out that a lot of that stuff that has stuck around for, gosh, it's been like 15 years now, was because of Ethan Van Sciver. So it shows that the concepts that he came up with have real staying power. Vox Day goes on, the fact that you genuinely think nothing happened in issue 1 and can't understand the significance of the history page demonstrates the extreme superficiality of your perspective. It said it was done badly, Vox Day. That's the problem. It was not done well. It's not done in a way that's interesting. And I can't, you know, I'm not a real writer. I can't tell you exactly how to make it more interesting. I know that, you know, Vox Day's published a lot more books than I have, but I'm just telling you, as a reader, this was a slog to get through. It took forever. I wasn't sure what was going on most of the time. I can see that, like, if I'm right about them just basically taking this almost word for word from the book that it's based on, I can see that this book might have been interesting, but as a comic, it didn't really work the way that they did it. I can at least say, like, what I have a problem with. And it's basically that there's a lot of, like, wasted dialogue here, where they're talking about the characterization between the main dude here, Chief Warrant Officer Graves, I think is his name, and his computer, a semi-sentient AI that runs the ship and apparently interacts with his brain to augment it. I'm not really sure, but so there's some interesting ideas here, and basically like a super city in space, kind of interesting. But as a comic, it just didn't work well. Maybe you just have to write more comics to get better at that. But what else does he say? I note that you're confusing the utilization of action to grab the short-lived attention span of the ADD sorted reader with genuine storytelling. So he's talking about. Some people criticize the fact that there's no action in this book. I don't remember Ethan Van Sciver actually saying that. I'm sure some other people did, but I don't remember him specifically saying that. But even if he did, I mean, action isn't necessary, but it does help. It helps you know that something is going on, basically. I know that there was, a few years ago, Marvel adapted The Stand into a long-running series. And it was actually really good. It was a really good adaptation. It was done really well. And maybe he should take a look at what Marvel did with The Stand and see how to properly adapt a book. Anyway, like, yeah, this whole response to Ethan Van Sciver's review is, I think it's just really tone deaf. Some of it may just be generating drama, trying to drive a wedge between the mainstream comics industry and what he's trying to do. And, you know, to a certain extent, I can respect that, even though I think it's dumb. But I'm hoping that he does secretly take into account some of Ethan's criticism. Because, I mean, Ethan Van Sciver, he's somebody that's built a brand. He's somebody that's built stories that last. He's somebody that's created characters that people care about. And Vox Day, he's done that for his own corner of the publishing industry. But I'm hoping that when he's breaking into comics that he actually listens to it. I respect what Vox Day is trying to do with Alt Hero, even though I don't know how it's actually going to turn out and how it's actually going to be on both an artistic level and on a financial level. But only time will tell. This story here does not inspire confidence, we'll just say. In any case, this is Unreal Chevron signing off.